Good evening. How are we all? Thank you all for continuing to be with us at the Another World is Possible Multimedia Festival that Eaton Workshop's been putting on for the last 3 days. It's been very exciting for us to be in conversation with you all virtually with 12 amazing short films that have been produced by Eaton over the last 2 years. It's I guess, a very humbling opportunity to highlight the untold and untold stories all across the globe and bring them all to you through the context of the work at Eaton Workshop. My name is Sheldon Scott, and I am the Director of Culture at Eaton Workshop. And I am very excited to be bringing you a conversation with a friend of mine, Halim Flowers. I'm gonna let Halim tell you his story, and then we're gonna get into a little dialogue, and hopefully you all will engage us with some questions. If you're on YouTube, please feel free to comment in the comment section your questions, and the moderator will make sure that those questions get to us. But in the meantime, our conversation tonight is about the activists as artists. You know, activism and art have had a storied relationship. It's not very hard to find how artistic practices of music, theater, visual arts, spoken word, how they all have contributed to activist movements and how they've supported movements and helped to deliver messages and narratives that really seek to bring about a conversation around human rights, whatever they might be at that time. And you know, it's quite often that you find artists and established makers who will lend their voice, their talent, and their platform to a particular issue, be it environmental, social, educational, health, wellness. Like, you can find a main artists who are all contributing to that. But you know, under the rare occasion, you actually find someone who started out as an activist, and through their evolution of their practice of activism, found themselves in a artistic expression and actually using art, whatever form they may have, as a way to amplify their activism work. And I think one of those few gems is the person sitting right across from me, Mr. Halim Flowers. I met Halim about 2 years ago, and I think we had met through a mutual friend and established some connection, and that was all through the work that was happening here at Eaton. He had heard, you know, about us and who we are and what we were trying to do, I think even before we actually opened the doors here in DC. And we finally got to meet and just, you know, immediately kind of hit it off and just really started a dialogue as one artist to an activist to an artist, a series of conversation about what it means to have social justice the center part of your work and your practice. So without further ado, you'll allow me to welcome Mr. Halim Flowers.
Thank you. My name is Halim Flowers. I'm an artist, and an artist is one who creates things, and my intention with my art is always, you know, to operate from a place of love. I believe in love, radical love, meaning that it's rooted in humanity and concern for not just the people, but all of the things that share this life experience with sentient and even non-sentient beings. So for me, my story, born in the nation's capital in 1980, so close to so much economic and political power, but yet so far away from it, raised in the Capitol Hill area during the crack era, in poverty and not understanding all of the dynamics of race and class as a child, but just knowing that we didn't have. And growing up in DC at a time where DC had the highest murder rate of any city in the country for a long period of time. So as a child experiencing the trauma of gun violence, and the result of seeing and experiencing poverty and gun violence, just understanding desperation, as a child, wanting to get the hell out of that situation, and made the poor decision to start selling crack cocaine when I was 12, and which was even more traumatic because I lost my dad to a drug addiction. Seeing my dad go through the crack addiction, but still making the decision to sell drugs, just out of desperation of wanting to escape poverty, in an attempt, as some conservative people say, to pull myself up by my own bootstrap. But as Dr. King said, we're beginning with no boot. And so at the age of 16, I was arrested for being an aid and abettor to a felony murder. They never said I shot and killed anyone. They said I was with someone who killed someone. And as a result of my refusal to cooperate with the government to prosecute the individual who they said I was with, they convicted me at trial under the accomplice liability doctrine of felony murder and gave me 2 life sentences, 2 indeterminate life sentences. And at that point, me growing up in the 80s, not really looking at it how I look at it now, hip hop is my sibling, right? We both were born around the same time. We were raised around the same time. We were both rejected by mainstream America. Hip hop was never at that time considered a formal genre of art. And my generation of socially constructed Black boys, even the liberals, like the Clintons and the Bidens, were calling us super predators, and were saying that we were fatherless, godless, jobless human beings who were deserving of the most worst form of penal punishment. And so, getting those 2 life sentences and growing up with hip hop, that was important because so much of my activism, if I could be considered an activist, began, I believe, in prison. And in prison, life is a word. They give you the word life, right? In order to get this life sentence off of you, more than likely, you're going to have to go to the law library. And when you study the law, it's written mostly in Latin. And you learn that the etymology of most of the English-speaking words that we use come from Latin. So growing up with this hip-hop background, having this fascination and connection with words, using words to tell a story. And me, I was a freestyle rapper before I started writing. So I'm able to come up with words that are impromptu and make them rhyme and compose them. So when I started to litigate for my freedom, I started to learn a deeper connection of the root of words, and not just like the linguistic etymology of words, but the spiritual impact of words, right? The emotional impact of words, and using these words now, instead of to make rhymes, now I'm writing letters to people, and I'm also composing poetry, and I'm writing motions and briefs to the courts for my freedom. And even going to prison as a juvenile amongst adults, and the way they was treating us, they wasn't giving us no school, no educational classes. I mean, they just put us on a tier, let us make knives and stab each other, and they was cool with that. So I remember the first time that I instigated a riot at DC jail in '97 was to get to the law library. It was to be able to get outside rec at least 5 days a week. That was due to us, but they wasn't giving it to us. And instead of us, I had the foresight to see, instead of us just sharpening knives and stabbing and killing each other, let's push this knife to get to this law library so we can get the hell out of jail, right? So at a young age, I understood the power of activating people towards something positive. And through words and through learning the law is how I kind of like transitioned into poetry and letter writing, heavily influenced by George Jackson, who was one of the most dynamic prison activists and writers in American history. And then, just using that as to start my own publishing company when I was locked up, published 11 books, used my 11 books that I published to connect with local legislators and activists and organizations to rewrite the juvenile sentencing law so that individuals like myself who was given life sentences under age 18 could have the opportunity to be resentenced and released. We got the law passed, the Incarceration Reduction Amendment Act in 2017, April 4th, and I was released from prison on March 21st, 2019.
Now, when you first, can you share with us a little bit, the realization that, which I understand has to be quite complex and very challenging for, and then you're 16 years old when you were sentenced, to realize the complexity of the carceral state and understand the need for you to engage your own agency and own storytelling, using that as a framework for liberation for not only yourself but others. I just want to say that that's quite an incredible thing to even contemplate as a teenager. But then to elevate that to a level, to use your way of organizing and responding to that by using art. That's also a particular journey. So I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit how you got to the space where you realized that, the shit that I'm in is X, Y, and Z. In order for me to navigate this shit and find my way out of this shit, I need to access something like art. I need to access my own narrative, my own agency to get that. And you mentioned George Jackson, and I'm just wondering, if you can share with us a little timeline, how you got to that point, to where you started writing and started publishing, and then eventually started making visual arts to carry that message for you.
I was convicted in 1998, and then after I was sentenced, I was still 17. They still sent me to Lord Maximum Security Facility. I was never supposed to be on that tip as a child, right? But they did, and 23 hours locked down, small cage. You only come out on the tip for 20 minutes, three times a week. And I used to rap, hip hop rap, and the younger guys that was down there, man, face, because they call me straight rap. So I'll be rapping, and I never forget a guy named Bossi, Durrell. He came to my cell and he asked me, he said, I hear you rapping, you smart, and I see you get the newspaper so you can read. He said, have you ever heard of George Jackson? And I was like, what, he's some kind of Michael Jackson? And he did that, he laughed, right? And he laughed, he was like, nah, I want you to read this book. And he gave me Solidarity, brother. And I've never been the same since then. For me to see someone who was socially constructed as Black, who got an indeterminate life sentence as an 18-year-old teenager, and who was ever able to educate himself inside of a cell to develop this practice of letter writing to pull people in like Angela Davis in her intellectual ilk, to support him and to galvanize this whole world community just through his mind and his articulation of words. It gave me the impetus to imagine another world. That's what this conference is about. Imagine another world that's possible. So I was like, damn, he looked like me, and he was going through what I was going through. So I can write and I can read, so I can do what he did. And that's how I began to engage in the practice of letter writing as a form of art and activism, because I'm writing my mother, I'm writing my father, I'm writing my family. Anybody who I could write, I was writing them about, reading H.I.J.O.S. I'm talking about Mao and Ho Chi Minh and Stalin and Lenin and, communism and socialism and capitalism, all these different individuals, these world figures and social economic ideologies that I had, I'm 16, 17, I went from selling drugs on the street, now I'm 18 years old doing 2 life sentences, and I'm talking about Karl Marx and Mao Zedong and the Red Book and, Muammar Gaddafi and, so, and it just was an evolution from that point on. And then, of course, as George Jackson says, the greatest impetus that any man will ever have will come from a woman that he admires the most. So for me, it was a woman named Nisa Chisley. She saw, because when I was 16, Blowback Productions filmed a documentary about myself and another juvenile lifer named Andre Berno. And it aired on HBO, it won the Emmy Award, and a lot of girls started writing me. And you know, when you're in prison, that's all you want is a girl to write you and come see you. So this young lady, Anissa Chisley, and she was a poetess and a spoken word artist, and she wrote me a letter. And you know, she was just so articulate. I could tell she was beautiful just from the aesthetic of her composition of words. And she said, you know, she was a poetess. I'm like, I do poetry too. I was lying. I just wanted her to come see me. So just from exchanging ideas with her through letter writing and visits, that's how I transitioned into poetry. And understanding once I started reciting poetry at contests that they was having, like when I went to the federal prisons when I was 21, and the feedback that the older brothers gave me, and they was like, you should write a book. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a book. I had no idea how to do it. I met an older brother from New Jersey named Michael Norwood, famous jailhouse lawyer. They call him Minka. He had his own publishing company. He had published 2 books. And he showed me how to do it. And I just started publishing my books in 2005. So I was like 24 going on 25. And once I got my first book done, and I went from 1 book into 11 books. And so you want me to go into the visual or just stay right there?
Well, no, I think that's a perfect break there, because I was just thinking about your description of your, and if I can offer something like you said, like when she wrote you, you said that you were a poet.
Right.
I'll ask you to, humbly reconsider that, because you were a poet, you were a spoken word poet, and then you went to the written word, I think is what you were saying, like when you started working with her, but that, I want to honor that practice, because like rap is poetry. Exactly. I know we don't always get to.
I stand to be correct.
Okay. So thank you. The friendly amendment accepted. Right. But I wanted to something else that you mentioned in there. You said you spoke to the brother that first introduced you to George Jackson. Mm-hmm. You said that you were reading the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And if we can talk about it, because like how I think about you and your practice and how I first experienced you and how I was able to witness a huge part of your transition, like, when we share time and space, both at Halcyon, we're both Halcyon alumni now. But, I remember very specifically, like, you had a very text focus to your visual arts. Right. And I, remember seeing some of the first pieces that you had, like when we had done a studio visit, you had these newspaper clippings. Mm-hmm. Which, like, I really want to hear about, like, your relationship to the printed media, right? Because you mentioned a other very salient point is like you were there at the time when the Clinton administration and people who we're still dealing with now, the President-elect Biden, with the crime bill and a lot of the language around, law and order, which people think is just unique to the Trump administration, but it's not. It's a part of the fabric of American idealism. But, you got to witness a lot of that, description of yourself in particular through the printed media. So I'm interested to hear like how you took the printed media, and I understand you rewrote, overwrote, edited. If you can share with us a little bit of that process of pulling the poetry in and putting it in a more visual perspective, and then how and when you started to share that with the audience, that particular work with those clippings.
I think one thing that's important, because sometimes I forget that even though mass incarceration is such a big problem, the majority of Americans never experienced it directly, but a majority of socially constructed Black Americans do. And when you are incarcerated, you got to understand, I come in 1997, so the internet wasn't really popular. You had no social media, no emails in there at that time. And the only way, and you take a child, a 16-year young child, and you say you want to be here for the rest of your life. So I never experienced like a prom, I never had a relationship with a woman, I never had my own place, my own car. So the only way that I can stay relevant to the world and engage with the world just through knowing it was through reading the newspaper and magazines. So my connection with newspapers is a very intimate connection, because when you go through institutional lockdowns in prison, you have no access to anything, no TV, no email, the phones. It's like institutional lockdown. And the only thing they allow you to get is your mail. And you can get your newspaper. That's the only thing that you can be guaranteed to pretty much, because nobody in society can write your letter every day. And but you can get that newspaper every day. And the pictures and the words, in particular with the Wall Street Journal, and I think that was so important because it's like a conservative paper. And when you grow up in DC, you grow up in like a supposedly a progressive town, right? So a lot of times what happens is people exist within a progressive bubble. So, and they get so enraptured in that bubble that they become threatened to even hear anything different. So for me, I'm glad that I engaged with the Wall Street Journal because it showed me how people think, that think different than me, how they feel about me and their ideology, so I could be able to understand. And if I am an activist and I am an artist who does the work of love, then in order to heal a person, you have to understand their disease, right? So for me, I was completely cut off from the world, and the newspaper was giving me visuals and text that kept me connected to a world that was telling me that I would never return. But I had the vision to see that I would return, that I would be on platforms like this. So the newspaper kept me relevant and it kept me informed. So once I transitioned, no, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan, for the record. Being able to listen to Jay-Z while I was incarcerated, he kept rapping about Bossi. Keep in mind, I didn't have a smartphone. I couldn't do it. Exactly. I couldn't say Siri was right. So I'm thinking like, damn, this must be an island that Jay-Z went to, or some shoes, or this some French wine, or this something this exotic, because he keep talking about it. So when the Wall Street Journal had an article on Jean-Michel Basquiat, and I saw that he looked like me. See, it was the same thing with George Jackson. Mm-hmm. I said, damn, this guy's in the visual art world, and he's black, right? And they didn't have any of his work. And I said, when I get home, I want to go see his work. And when I got home, every city that I went to, I would always go to search for his work. And then I started learning about YouTube and watching his documentaries. So even though I didn't have the opportunity to get into the visual art world until I got out, me learning about Basquiat through the Wall Street Journal made me to start reading the articles about Pollock and Combs and Rembrandt and all the others, right? So once I got out and had the opportunity to access cameras, more papers than just one paper, I already had a philosophy developed as a poet. So now it just became natural. Okay, I'm going to start my visual art with taking what I'm comfortable with. We revert back to what we're comfortable with, writing poetry and reading the newspaper. So just combine those two and create a visual body of work out of that. So that's how I transitioned into the visual art world.
Because I think something that was very clear to me, like, when you first introduced me to your work, your visual artwork, I think there is a practice of reclamation there. And I see the foundation of that reclamation really being in this sense of like rewriting your own narrative and your write-overs for these clippings, like, watching, like reading what you write on top of that, because it's what it communicates to me is like you have your own story to tell. And I think that, part of the structure that you and I share as Black men in this world, we do have a hard time and a challenge sometimes pushing back on people telling our narratives, like people telling us what our stories are, right? Because
and our solutions.
Exactly, because I noticed you use the term socially constructed Blackness,
right? And
I think I understand what you're saying, because there are tropes, there's mythology, and I explore a lot of mythology in my work as well too, and those things have real life consequences. It affects our ability to, be who we are. It affects our ability to communicate to people, because no matter sometimes what we say or what we do, they hear, they see, they experience something else. It affects our ability to lead, which is always a challenge and always undermined. So I see that, and I think, for me, it's a very inspirational part to see of your work. So, but then now applying that, like how you, kind of when you started to do the visual stuff and bring it from the poetry, and, in your mentioning your aspiration of Basquiat, and, you and I were talking earlier about, this concept of like dialogue, inter-artist dialogue, and how we speak to each other as artists, how we speak to artists who are our contemporaries, how we speak to artists who were here before us, and how we speak to artists who will be here long after we've gone. And, we use, obviously, our work as that medium of translation. I would love to have you take us through, these three works right here in particular, to talk about that and contextualize the inspiration and some of the language that you share with Basquiat, and then how you created your own language and put your own narrative within that moment.
Well, this first piece, starting here, is titled New Slave. I actually took a court document from my judge that was ordered on October of this year. Even though I was released and I was on probation, and then I was put on unsupervised probation, the probation office has this fascination, and we know this from the Meek Mill case, with just being so intrusive of your life. And it's like, if you come home from prison and you're successful outside of their model, because their model is for you to come home, get a job, low wage job, and struggle. I never bought into that. I say, no, I can transcend that, because under that paradigm, 7 out of 10 people come back to prison and be recidivists. So when you get out and you experience some type of notoriety and success, it becomes threatening to them. They really don't want you to succeed, especially if they can, in their mind, they create a hierarchy that you're doing better than them, right? So I'm able to have a good relationship with my judge. I email her every month, send her pictures. So once I told her what they was trying to do about me traveling to leave the country, because I have a solo show in London, and I'm going to Mexico tomorrow, God willing. So she issued this order and said that I can travel wherever I want, internationally and nationally. And I took this order and I painted red, white, and blue over it, representative of the American flag and patriotism and patriarchy. And this is a Basquiat. If you look at Basquiat's graffiti, he would ask like these multi-choice questions. So in this piece right here, I say a felon can never visit A, England, B, Japan, C, Canada, D, all of the above. So even though my judge said that I can travel, these countries have laws in place that if you are a convicted felon, then you can never travel there. Never, right? So this one right here, inside of the mouth, I have duly convicted, because and then right here, 13th Amendment slave. Because the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states that involuntary servitude and slavery is hereby abolished except for those who've been duly convicted of a crime. So once you've been duly convicted, you are the neo 20th, 21st century slave. And this statement right here, give us free, is from the brother CK from the Armistead case, who seized the ship, and this was like reportedly like something that he said in court, give us free. And because I feel like once you've been convicted, then you always have this scarlet letter of felon that you're trying to, because I had this recurring dream that I'm not free yet. Like I'm in prison and I'm waiting to get released under the new law. And I asked my wife, why do I keep having this dream? It's like, because I'm not free. I'm not really free. So in this piece right here, equality is an equity. 3 words. What happens is, when I would travel before the quarantine, and I didn't start painting until the quarantine. That's the first thing. But when I would travel before the quarantine, I noticed I would meet these people, and those who are socially constructed as white, and they would say, I do equity work. Then I would say, well, how do you interpret equity? And they'd be like, well, equal rights. And, you know, so I was like, well, equity is ownership. Equity is not about equality. Equity is about ownership. It's about land. It's about property. It's about wealth. It's not we all created equal. Only you believe that we're not equal. We know that we're equal. But what we need is equity. And as long as we don't have equity and reparations for the redlining and the lynching and the slavery and all the things, even the things that happened after slavery, we could just forgive slavery, but all of the economic laws and policies and cultures that was put in place to keep us economically, politically, and socially suppressed, that to me is what we're looking for, and not equality. We're looking for those reparations and not to just be able to eat at the restaurant, which is what integration gave us. And in the last piece, briefly, I love mathematics. I'm a nerd. And mass incarceration is American, it's apple pie. And it's, you know, in the middle is the red, white, and blue. And on the outside of that is red, white, and blue mixed together creates this purple. So in the middle is like this theme of patriarchy and what it means to be American. But you know, the purple represents the social experiment, the blend of all these cultures and people. But at the end of the day, when they would describe Obama, they would say the leader of the free world. But how could it be the leader of the free world when we have the most people incarcerated on the planet than any other country in the world? So mass incarceration, as Malcolm X said, racism is American, is apple pie. And I feel like that mass incarceration and its extension to slavery is American, is apple pie with the 3 Ks. It's a new form of lynching. Now instead of being lynched from trees, you get lynched from the wooden bench and the gavel that the judge banged.
All very salient and powerful points and expressions made to this work. What are you working on now? Like, where does the intersection of your activism and your art, if you could describe that intersection to us, what does it look like now?
Now for me, it's just, now that I'm engaging more with visual arts instead of spoken word and written word, I'm studying like the science of color theory, how it impacts different cultures, colors, how to use colors to tell a story without the words. I want to phase into a new body of work where to challenge myself, because I'm so connected to words, but I want to master the ability to be able to say everything that I'm saying without putting the text on the paper. So I'm studying artists like, you know, Cicely Brown, Sam Gilliam, Cy Twombly, artists who was able to create these abstract, you know, experiences just through colors and allowing the colors and allowing the abstraction to speak. And I don't have to feel a need that everybody gets it with me just writing it bold, equality, and challenging myself to do that with just the abstraction.
Well, I'm sure you know that you are in very sacred territory here, being in DC, you know, in the Washington Color School, and the legacy of all of those people that you mentioned, and abstraction and Black abstraction. Like, you know, I'm very excited to see what that evolution is going to look like for your work. If you had a specific directive or call to action for people to do, for people to take away from this talk and this conversation in your practice, if you have it now, share it. But if not, you know, we'll make sure that we get it to the audiences so they know, what to do with this information. Because you provided very powerful and poetic and personal context. I feel it's a part of every part of your expression as an artist, as an activist, as a human being. If there is something that they can hold on to and they can grab onto directly in a way that they can respond and contribute to that, please feel free to share that now. But if not, we'll make sure we get it to them and we'll share it. And this video will be available in perpetuity so they can see that. But if you have something now, we can share it. But otherwise, send us something and make sure we get it.
Oh, my message is simple. We just experienced an election where people were more driven to galvanize to vote by someone who they hated more than what they loved, right? So my thing is that no elected representative or law enforcement or judge or prosecutor can effectively legislate law, administer law, prosecute law, or enforce law to the people unless they love themselves and the people whom they are elected to serve. And my thing is that we have to get more into really loving ourselves and not allowing our authentic self to be suppressed because it doesn't fit into what is trending and popular, and using that love for self to genuinely love those who love us, which should be easy, right, with a form of gratitude, and to transcend to a space to first conceptualize and then to actualize what it means to embody a lifestyle where we can even learn to love those who are silly enough to think that they hate us, right? Because if we just keep preaching to the choir, we're not going to correct this this cultural problem that we have, as you would say, perpetuity in America, that through race, class, gender, creed, and sexuality encourages us to put these 5 blocks of filters on our eyes and to make us see how we are different and how we should be indifferent towards one another, right? So we have to transcend that. I don't think we can do it with love. I don't think electing Joe Biden or anybody else is going to get us out of that. And I believe that art eats culture, art creates culture, and culture eats law and policy for breakfast, right? So my call to people, and it's particularly artists, all people, to love themselves and understand we're not going to get to a better space with hate, but we have to love. And then love is not something passive because I'm socially constructed as Black and I say love. You think I'm perpetuating a Dr. King understand about allowing people to slap you upside your head. I'm not talking about that type of love. Love is dynamic and assertive, but we have to get to a space that we're so grounded in love that we can begin to sit down and have truth and reconciliation with those who think opposite from us, right? Not the people who think like us, but the people who wear the MAGA hats. Them the people that we need to be talking to, because the truth and reconciliation got to stop with them in order to make America what it's supposed to be on paper, for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Halim, for sharing with us. And thank you for actually showing us that another world is possible. Thank you for allowing us to bear witness to you creating your own world, because I know what that meant for you. And I still stand in awe and admiration of you and your work. And I'm happy to continue to be supportive and create a platform that you can continue to do that work and example for everyone else what it means to create another world in that possibility. So thanks for sharing. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We still have a few more panels left tonight. The next one I will be moderating with the No Pride, No Justice. And then we have a panel at 9. And that is, what's the name of that panel? Yeah, you're going to see the behind the scenes.
An Honest World.
Yeah, An Honest World. Yeah, we're live, we're here. So An Honest World. So stick with us, and then make sure you stay at EatonWorkshop.org to get updates on our final day of the Another World is Possible Festival, which will be Monday, Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again. Have a good night. See you soon.
You gotta tell me about that black school. I wasn't here.
Oh yeah, the Washington Cover School. Yeah, that's where Sam Gilliam came from.
Yes?
Yeah.